welcome everyone. Thanks for joining us. This webinar is being hosted by the Chesapeake Bay Journal, and we're all here tonight to talk about dolphins in the Chesapeake Bay. I'm Laura Lutz. I'm the editor at the Chesapeake Bay Journal. And obviously there's a huge interest in dolphins out there, and what to many of us seems to be a growing number of them. They're beautiful, they're fascinating, and they're also really important to scientists. And that's what we're here to talk about tonight. A few housekeeping notes as we get started. First of all, we are recording. So if you're not comfortable with that, I want to make sure you're aware of it. There will be a link to the recording. So if you need to sign off early, or you know someone that wasn't able to join us live, that link will be shared with you, hopefully in a day after tonight's event. So our panelists have videos and microphone access. The rest of you do not. So if you're concerned that you're not showing, that's okay. That's the way it's intended. It helps us manage the numbers that are online. So you may have participated in an event like this before online, and we do want audience questions. So the chat box is a great way to communicate and be excited about the topic. But if you can, you should be able to see at the bottom of your, at least on my screen, it's the bottom, but somewhere around the edges of your screen, by hovering your mouse, there should be a Q&A button. And what we'd like to do is really encourage you to put your questions into the Q&A box instead of the chat box. And that helps us because if we have a lot of questions coming at us and some are similar, we can sort them, we can group them and get them to the right panelist more easily. And Jeremy Cox, who's one of our staff writers and sporting the dolphin hat, will be helping with that behind the scenes. So thanks very much to Jeremy for that.
You got it.
Thanks, Jeremy. Now, to get the discussion started, I'm going to pass this over to Whitney Pipkin. Whitney is a longtime reporter with the Bay Journal. She's written several articles about dolphins in the Bay over the past few years. And so she's the logical person to help guide us through this conversation. So she's going to introduce the guests and get us started. Whitney, are you ready?
Thanks, Laura. Yes, I'm ready. Thanks. I've been wanting to have this conversation since I first interviewed folks like you guys about dolphins, because there's just so many extra questions we can't get to in the story. So let me introduce our expert panelists. These are all scientists who study dolphins in the Chesapeake Bay and have been doing so for several years now. So they are beginning to glean some trends for us. So first we have Jamie Testa, if you want to wave. She's the project coordinator for the Chesapeake Dolphin Watch at the University of Maryland Center for Environmental Science. And Lauren Rodriguez is a graduate assistant, research assistant, also with Chesapeake Dolphin Watch. So if you've interacted with the app, they are some of the faces behind the app. And Anne-Marie Jacoby is associate director of the Potomac Chesapeake Dolphin Project. Hi, Anne-Marie. And she also studies dolphins down in North Carolina. And Melissa Collier is a PhD student at Georgetown University, also with the Potomac Chesapeake Dolphin Project. All right, so we're going to start with some videos. You'll see them start to pop up on here. Just a little preview of the star attractions, which is dolphins. These are, a lot of these are being fed to us by people who have used the Chesapeake Dolphin Watch app. And it's great because you can not only point out where you're seeing them, but you can also crowd share some of the images that you see. So if you're not familiar with the app, we'll definitely link to some of these resources at the end of our time here. But we're going to head into questions as well. So you can see a little caption here about whereabouts these are taken. All right, so everyone really loves watching dolphins, but many don't know that dolphin research is taking place inside the Chesapeake Bay. I'm going to ask my first questions to Jamie and Anne-Marie. So the founders of each of your organizations, both of their research efforts started with dolphins in other countries before they came to the US and found them here. What makes it a good time to be studying dolphins in the Chesapeake Bay? Anne-Marie, if you want to start us off.
Sure. I just want to start off by saying thank you to the Bay Journal and to everyone here for coming and listening to us. It's great to have this opportunity. So as you mentioned, the founder and director of the project is Professor Janet Mann, and she had been studying dolphins in Shark Bay, Western Australia for over 30 years prior to starting the Potomac Chesapeake Dolphin Project in 2015. And the beginnings of the project are quite serendipitous. So Professor Mann was actually closing on a house that she bought at the mouth of the Potomac when she first saw dolphins in the river. And that really piqued her curiosity, which then transpired into what is now the Potomac Chesapeake Dolphin Project, which is a nonprofit research organization based out of Georgetown University. And I think, to get back to your main question, but I think it's an important time to be studying dolphins in the Potomac River and throughout the entire Chesapeake Bay for two overarching reasons. So one is for their conservation, and the other one is for more of a scholarly or intellectual pursuit. And when it comes to their conservation, it's important to study dolphins in this area from both a population and ecosystem-wide perspective. So bottlenose dolphin populations that use the mid-Atlantic regions, the waters in the mid-Atlantic area, are managed under the National Marine Fisheries Service in 3 units. And all 3 of these units, their distributions actually overlap with the mouth of the Chesapeake Bay. And 2 of these management units, or stocks as the National Marine Fisheries Service likes to call them, are considered to be depleted, or in other words, they're below sustainable population levels. And this is because of the impacts of a naturally caused disease outbreak from 2013 to 2015. And Melissa Collier will talk more about that. And the 3rd management unit is considered strategic because the number of deaths caused by human interactions is higher than it can be for the population to sustain healthy numbers. So even though bottlenose dolphins as a whole, as a species, are not considered to be endangered, the mid-Atlantic bottlenose dolphin populations are of concern, which makes it really important for us to understand everything we can about them. How many there are, where they're going, how long they stay in an area, do they return to the same area, what are they doing in the area? However, there's one big problem, which is that dolphin use within the Chesapeake Bay is not currently represented within any of these management units. So there's kind of this dearth of data, and that ends up causing a problem when we're trying to manage them and see if they're at healthy population numbers or not. And then when it comes to understanding on an ecosystem-wide level, so dolphins are top predators, and therefore they're going to be impacting the community function and structure of the Chesapeake Bay and the Potomac River. They eat about 30 pounds of fish per day, which is a lot. And they're also sentinel species. So meaning that they indicate the health of the environment that they live in. So being marine mammals, they have to surface to breathe. And when they surface to breathe, we can see whether or not they have any skin anomalies, such as lesions, or if they're emaciated. And these health indicators could really show, like, okay, is the water polluted, or is the quality of fish that they're eating, is it poor, or are there not enough? And then lastly, to wrap this all up, but when we're talking about the scholarly pursuits, these animals are adapted to live in the ocean. So this is a highly saline environment, and the Chesapeake Bay and its rivers, they constitute a temperate estuary. So the bay varies quite a bit in salinity, but also in temperature. So the interaction between the ecology of the Chesapeake and the behavior, movement patterns, physiology, and more of dolphins is very interesting from an intellectual standpoint. So studying dolphins in Chesapeake Bay will not only allow us to promote their conservation, but it also is going to provide a better understanding of the species as a whole, as well as how other marine mammal species have evolved to be in an estuarine environment, or how they inhabit an estuarine environment.
Yeah, thank you, Emery. So, and people just really love interacting with dolphins and learning about them and seeing them. So James, tell us what, in your interaction with people through the app or in settings like this, how can people get involved, and what is it about dolphins that people love?
Yeah, nothing beats a day on or near the water when you see dolphins. So that can't be beat no matter who you are or where you're from. It's really popular. I wanted to go back and just echo Anne-Marie's, thanks you guys for having this opportunity for us and to talk about our research. Thank you to the Bay Journal. So when we think about a good time to study dolphins in the Chesapeake, we're recruiting members of the public. And so one of the most important things for us is the access to technology, right? We can just have members of the public go about their daily lives, boating, visiting the waterfronts, canoeing, kayaking, and then access to a smartphone that we all know and love and usually have in our back pocket or waterproof bag, depending on where you're at, allows people to report their sightings to us and, helps our research in that really easily accessed way. I think, access to technology is the number one reason this is a good time for Chesapeake Dolphin Watch to be in operation. And
maybe we should start showing some of our graphs that show what we're seeing. So the first one, the bar graph is really going to show what I think a lot of us are interested in. When you get on your boat year to year, you're not looking at data. You're just saying, oh, I'm seeing more dolphins. This is my sense. But here's the data that they've collected. Jamie or maybe Lauren, do you want to jump in and tell us what we're seeing here?
Yeah, so this is total sightings reported in Chesapeake Dolphin Watch. We get around about or over 1,000 sightings reported to us each year. So generally speaking, you can see that the best time to see dolphins, those highest, tallest bars, or the most sightings reported is in June and July. And it does vary from year to year somewhat.
Right.
The nuance to where you're going to see them and when is easier to see on other graphics. And we're gonna give you as the best information that we can here. So not all of these sightings reported to us will be confirmed. We do have to go through a data validation process in order to confirm all the sightings, but we do get over 1,000. We usually confirm about 75% of the ones that we receive.
So let's think about this graph to me real quick before we go to the next one. How do you know whether this is like people just on the water more in the summer versus more dolphins on the?
Yeah, so we've validated this past just folks out on their boat, because obviously June and July is a great time to be out on your boat, with our acoustic detection, so our underwater listening for animals. So that seasonal trend that we see from our acoustic data follows the sightings data to the T pretty much. So that's how we validated what people are seeing on the water.
Yeah. And then Laura, if you want to show us the next one. So this is an animation, and Lauren, if you could tell us what we're seeing here. This is an animation of what you can see dolphins, how and when they come into the bay and leave. So Lauren, could you tell us a little bit kind of more background on that? They're just here on vacation, if you will, or however you want to put that.
Yeah, so here, if you want to zoom in a little bit, we can see the Chesapeake Bay. And can you zoom out for like the whole page to see the bottom part? So with sorry, back to the Chesapeake, but there is a little key that shows you what months that we're seeing with the colors of the dots, but I can try explaining it generally. So we're seeing, this is at the beginning of the year with these darker colors. Dolphins are seen in the bay in the lower sections. So near the James River, the York River, they're coming in through that Atlantic outlet and inlet. And then they are going up throughout the Chesapeake Bay as the year goes on. So they come around March or April, and then they leave around September or October. There is the occasional dolphin up near the Bay Bridge during times that we wouldn't expect them to be there, but that's just kind of like how all science is. There is an outlier that doesn't follow the pattern of the rest. And that's exactly what we're seeing with the dolphin data too. Although we do see most of them in the Chesapeake Bay, in the Potomac River, in the Patuxent River during the summer season. And we're also seeing them out on the edge of Maryland right there near Ocean City. And we also have acoustic devices deployed there. So we can track the citizen science sightings of dolphins, as well as the acoustic presence of dolphins, both in the Chesapeake Bay and outside the region.
Great. And then we have one more map that will show you your big question, where to take your boat to most probably in July if you're out for the 4th or this summer. So
Yeah, so this is a popular method of spatial analysis. So you're seeing where the dolphins are clustering each year. Right here, we have a map of July 2021. So the points are the actual dolphin sightings submitted into Chesapeake Dolphin Watch, like you saw in the animation. And then the green hot spots, or the dark green shaded areas, that's where we're seeing most of them. So up near the Annapolis Bay Bridge and up near Baltimore, we're seeing a bunch in June and July, so during the summer season. And then in the Potomac River right there, we're seeing a hot spot, as well as the Patuxent. So the mouth of these rivers where a lot of fish are swimming in and out of the Chesapeake Bay, that's pretty much where the dolphins are headed to. In these lucrative regions, especially down here at the mouth of the Chesapeake, because to get into the bay, the dolphins have to go through there. So you're almost always going to see dolphins near the mouth of the Chesapeake Bay, because that's where either daily or weekly they're coming in and out.
okay.
You can go to the next slide.
Oh, is there another one? I don't know if we have another one.
Oh,
Sorry.
no problem.
But now is a good time to remind folks, if you have questions, there's a Q&A box of your screen and you can type them in there. Jeremy will grab them for me to ask during the Q&A, which is coming up after a few more questions that we have for our guests. So then this next question is Melissa. And Anne-Marie got at some of the population dynamics that are really complicated. When we see dolphins, they can come from all sorts of places. There's not just one group that travels together up the East Coast. Can you talk to us a little bit more about those dynamics and where these dolphins we're seeing may be coming from?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, so Anne-Marie was talking a little bit about how these dolphins that we're seeing in the Chesapeake and just the mid-Atlantic bottlenose dolphin population in general are divided up by NOAA into these stocks. And so they're kind of just thought to be like almost like subpopulations in a way, which sometimes these subpopulations intermix with each other, depending on their ranging patterns. And so the idea is that a dolphin is assigned to a particular stock, and these stocks kind of like interbreed within each other and have similar movement and ranging patterns. So the dolphins that we're seeing in the Chesapeake area and specifically in our area of the Potomac, we think that they're actually a part of several different stocks. So Anne-Marie again kind of touched on this. So one of these stocks is the northern migratory stock, and these are animals that tend to be kind of in our area and as far north as New Jersey in the summertime, in these warmer water months. And then they tend to spend their time or their winters down in the North Carolina area. And we also believe that there are some animals that are part of a North Carolina estuarine stock. So that means that we're kind of like the northernmost part of their territory. They'll be up with us again in the summer times. And then they'll be down in North Carolina again in the winter. But something that we're kind of noticing as well is that there does seem to be some animals that spend all of their time in Virginia, Maryland waters, or are seen at least year round in Virginia, Maryland waters. So there are some animals that we see up here in the middle sort of Chesapeake area near the Potomac in the summer. And then these same animals are seen again in the Virginia Beach area in the winter months. So really interesting to kind of know where the animals are going along the coastline. And, you know, we can actually tell this because we can take photos of the dorsal fins of the animals that we see out in the Potomac, and we can match their dorsal fins to photos from other researchers at other sites. And so that's how we can kind of tell where these animals are going along the coastline. And it's really interesting to see the different dynamics.
Yeah, that's great. I did not know any were sticking around that long, so that's fun. And you all have been studying and doing Chesapeake specific research for a good bit now. So let's talk a little bit more about that, what each of you are working on. Lauren, you conducted a research project about the presence of dolphins in the bay. What surprised you from that? And as you talk, Laura might show more photos and videos as well, but what surprised you from your research work?
Yeah, so I published an analysis last summer in the open access journal PLOS One, and this was focused on assessing the where and why of dolphins the where and when of dolphins with why. So from the Dolphin Watch sightings, when we were getting dolphin reports, I looked at the environmental variability at that time. So I looked at temperature, salinity, and tidal phase in relation to dolphin sightings that we were receiving in the app from 2017 to 2019. And basically we found that when water temperatures were above 24 degrees Celsius, which is about like 75 Fahrenheit, there was a significant amount more of dolphin sightings reported to our app. So basically saying those same trends that we're seeing in the summertime, that dolphins are reported more in the Chesapeake Bay, it makes sense because the temperature of the bay is the most comfortable for the dolphins to reside in. Similar with the range of salinities that we found them in, from 6 to 22, that's a huge range of salinities. And that's because dolphins are mammals and they can face a lot of different environmental conditions because they, unlike fish, aren't restricted by the amount of oxygen in the water because they breathe it from the air. They're not restricted by these saline conditions because that's not how their body processes the water like fish. So with all that versatility, we find that dolphins are just very randomly distributed throughout the bay because they're following those prey species. And I'll touch on that other research on their prey later, because that's what founded my master's work.
And that research has been used to kind of, by the Navy and others to say, oh, dolphins really are not just in outside Virginia Beach, but they're throughout the bay. And some official people are responding to that as well in their reports. So that's kind of the so what of the impact at this point. And Anne-Marie, you and Melissa had an interesting experience on the boat studying dolphins in the summer of 2019. That's pretty exciting for y'all and for all of us in the bay that followed dolphins. Can you tell us about what you guys got to witness and what that confirmed for you?
Yeah, of course. Just one thing about how we collect data. So we go out on the boat and we will actually look for groups of dolphins. And when we see a group of dolphins, we will mark where we saw them. We'll take photographs, as Melissa was mentioning, of their dorsal fins. We'll count if there are any moms or babies, or how many are males or juveniles based on size and some other characteristics, as well as the predominant behavior, so what they're doing. So that's kind of the work that the Potomac Chesapeake Dolphin Project does, or at least some of it. And we also have acoustics projects that we're doing now as well. But what we saw in August of 2019 was what we suspect is a birth. And so Melissa and I were out on the boat and we came upon a group of dolphins near Louisetta, Virginia. And so that's 25 miles up the Potomac River. And we were doing our usual data collection when we saw this very large cloud of red tinted water that definitely to us was blood. And at first I was extremely alarmed, okay, what happened? Did one of the dolphins get injured? And I'm like, oh my gosh, did a boat run over one of them? Something like that. But then I saw no differences in their behavior or anything like that. So I was like in my head processing very quickly. I was like, oh my goodness, could this be a birth? Could we have just had a birth here right now? And so I told everyone, I was like, look for a really tiny, tiny baby. So something that's less than 3 feet in size and is like squishy, still lumpy, kind of with a floppy dorsal fin. And when I turn to look at the bow, I see this extremely tiny, tiny newborn animal. And the fin was still floppy. So all of that was very indicative to that baby had been born either right then or, just very recently. And so really what that, and this is very rare occurrence. There's only been one other witnessed birth in the wild. So what this confirmed to us is that the females coming into the Potomac and the Chesapeake are giving birth there. And we use, as I was kind of mentioning, these physical features, so size, if they're lumpy, and they have something called fetal lines, as well as their swimming position, so how they swim alongside their mother, and their surfacing behavior, so whether it's very erratic or not, to determine a calf's age. And we've seen many newborns. So those are animals that are 3 months or younger. And many, if you're out on the water from like the second half of May through till June, you'll probably see a lot of newborns that are less than a week to, no more than 3 weeks old. So please, it's amazing. You want to watch them, and they're incredibly cute, but they also don't know how to move around boats. So, please keep your distance from those groups, because even if, you think that dolphins like to ride your bow, which they often do, like the babies just don't know when they're that young. They don't know how to interact around boats. So just be really careful about them. But it's really important for us to know that dolphins are giving birth within the Potomac, and also to document how many females there are, because females really are the linchpin of populations. So they're the indicators for a healthy population. And that's because females have the limiting reproductive, resource of eggs, but also because females in bottlenose dolphins, they invest quite a bit of time into raising their calves. So what we're finding here by tracking individuals is that calves are dependent on their mothers here anywhere between 2 to 4 years. So that means that anywhere between 2 to 4 years, a female is not having another calf.
Yeah, and it also, don't they have a 12-month gestation? So
yes, they have a 12-month gestation period. Yeah, so where there's birthing going on, there's also breeding going on. So we'll see a lot of socializing or mating behaviors going on. And the fact that we're seeing the same animals come back year after year, it's likely that those animals that are birthing in the Potomac are also coming to the area to breed. And I'll say one more thing before I finish off, but this is a really good sign, because in order for dolphins to be coming into the area and to be raising very young calves, that means that there has to be a lot of food in the area, because nursing is extremely energetically taxing. And also it probably means that there are fewer predators, natural predators in the Chesapeake as compared to adjacent coastal waters. So I can really think of one primary predator, and that would be the bull shark. And then also the Chesapeake, Potomac, it has very complex habitat. And so that's a good way of avoiding predation as well. So that's just a few things that it's told us, and we're very excited to keep studying the moms and babies, because they're very important for understanding the health of a population or populations.
thank you. I'm gonna just some audience questions real quick here. We have one from Molly. She says, I hear manatees are showing themselves in the bay. Do dolphins interact with manatees? Has anybody ever witnessed them interacting? Anybody can pop in that can answer here.
So I can pop in for that. We have not actually witnessed that interaction. And I think a lot of that might have to do with the habitat that the manatees occupy versus the habitat that the dolphins occupy is a little bit different. So manatees tend to be, they can talk, they go between freshwater and saline or more salty environments. But because they do feed on seagrass and vegetation, they do tend to be in a little bit of fresher environments, as well as in shallower waters, because they also need warmer waters. And so shallower waters tend to be a little bit warmer. And so their habitats really don't overlap enough for that interaction to occur. Not saying it never has, but we have not witnessed that. But that's a really interesting question.
Yeah. And Gary asked about salinity, which I think Lauren covered briefly, the salinity that dolphins tolerate. You said it was like 6 to 22. What was
It was a very wide range, because they'll eat fish from the top of the bay, coming from like around Baltimore, which is very fresh water because of the Susquehanna River and all those rivers flowing into the bay at the top, versus when they come into the bay at the bottom, it's highly, highly saline because of the Atlantic Ocean. So you're seeing 22 PBT down at the mouth of the bay and 6 up at the top of the bay, but the dolphins don't seem to mind.
Yeah. Great. And Charles asks, I've been on the Breton Bay for 70 years, never seen them until last year. When did dolphins used to come and go? Has that changed their range of, and is there, my personal, is there a climate change element to that, or range of when they're here changed at all?
I think we need to continue to gather a little bit of information, but we do hear from folks. I've been on I've lived on this creek for 25 years. I've never seen a dolphin. Now I see them regularly. Or I've been here and I see them all the time, but things are shifting in terms of when they show up and when they leave. So I think we need to do a little bit more data collection. I will say, when watermen or fishers who are regularly out in multiple seasons see shifts, that's a really good indication for us that something has changed. And one of the watermen we work with on the Rappahannock said absolutely over the last 40 years he has seen increased numbers of dolphins. So not surprising that he sees them, but that population or the abundance is changing. So I think we're going to continue to explore. I don't know who else wants to add to that.
I can add a bit to that. So one thing is that I know it seems shocking to some people. I mean, even Professor Janet Mann, who'd been studying dolphins halfway across the world, like realizing, oh my gosh, there are dolphins in Potomac. But dolphins within the Chesapeake Bay area is nothing new. Why they have not been included within management and there's been more awareness is something that is a great question that I have. But they're nothing new, and work has been done on dolphins within the Chesapeake since the late 1980s. I mean, that's focused more in the mouth of the Chesapeake, but work has been done, and it is known that they come into the area. Like Jamie was saying,
Anne-Marie,
over time is something. Am I back? Jamie was saying, whether or not their presence has changed over time is something that is yet to be learned. And as part of my dissertation, as Jamie was saying, talking to watermen, I'm actually interviewing watermen and have been throughout the entire Potomac River to get at, how far back in time have they been seeing dolphins and has there been a change over time? And so hopefully in the next year, I don't want to spoil anything, I can come back with what I found on that.
Great, because we don't have, the app has not been used since the 80s, if you will. So they don't want to compare apples to oranges here, but those anecdotal stories can bring a lot of color and background into what we're seeing. Okay, we will get to some more questions, so keep them coming.
And just a really quick point of order. I see our participants, our panelists are superheroes. So if you haven't heard your question answered live, you might want to check the answered box in the Q&A, because they have been going in and typing out the answers to many of these questions. So Thank you.
Thank you. You guys are multitasking on me. So let's get at what we don't know, what you guys are still studying. Anne-Marie just pointed to something that she's still studying. Melissa, I'm really interested to hear about, I don't know if folks have been like in the Virginia Beach area for a few years, but there was a season where disease was a big part of the story of dolphins in the Chesapeake Bay. That was one of the things that really fueled some of the research that's ongoing today. So what are you looking at with disease impacts of these animals? And what are some of your pressing questions before next batch hits dolphins in this area?
Yeah, so the disease piece that Whitney's referring to was an outbreak of morbillivirus, which is basically like dolphin version of measles. And it started in 2013 and lasted until 2015. And between that time period, we found more than 1,600 dolphins washed ashore dead between Florida and New York. And that number in of itself is huge, but it doesn't account for the number of animals that didn't wash ashore and ones that we couldn't document and just kind of died at sea. And abundance analysis from before this outbreak compared to abundance analyses after this outbreak suggests that some of these populations actually suffered a decline of about 20,000 individuals during this time period, which is, close to half their population. So it's kind of crazy. It's really hard to study disease in marine mammals specifically. It's hard to study marine mammals in general, but when we're trying to understand how disease transmits in them, it can be very difficult. So we haven't actually learned all that much yet. And so my dissertation is trying to find out a little bit more about it. So we know that this virus is seen worldwide in a variety of whales and dolphins. And we think that our dolphins, or these Atlantic dolphins, actually probably got this virus from interacting with pilot whales, which are asymptomatic carriers of the virus. So they don't die when they get the virus. They don't really get sick when they get the virus, but they can transmit it. So we also think that it's this intermixing of these different populations, these northern migratory stocks, these estuarine stocks, that probably is what spread the virus up and down the entire coast. And one of the other things we've noticed is that there were more males that washed ashore dead in this time period than females. And the initial and majority of strandings for this outbreak actually occurred in our waters, in Virginia, Maryland waters. The majority of those strandings actually being in the Chesapeake Bay. So this makes our dolphins really important for studying how disease spreads and why this actually happened to our animals and what role they play in the disease spread as well.
And what I found interesting when we were talking before was that it's respiratory, it's spread through respiratory droplets, if you will. All this language we all know now from COVID. And so the idea of the Chesapeake, I know this is maybe not, but like being a super spreader type summer event, like these dolphins coming in, but that's probably just where you're finding them, and it's a great place to study them. But that's a helpful kind of peg for my brain to think about how the disease dynamics and how it relates to some of the issues we've been through. Thank you so much for that. Lauren, we've got some more photos we're going to show here, showing some of the stuff that you are studying in an ongoing way. So tell us what's happening in this photo and what you're doing with DNA samples related to dolphins.
All right. So if anyone is a fan of true crime or any sort of mystery show, you know the term forensic analysis. And so basically that's been going on since the 80s, 90s, people taking samples and like fingerprints looking for who it is. And so I'm doing the same thing in the Chesapeake Bay to find who is around when dolphins are around. So I take samples, just water samples, just really easy, push it through a really small filter. And from that filter, I capture a lot of the genetic information from the water. So I'm pushing all this water through a filter, gathering up the skin cells, the hair cells, any fecal matter, and I sequence the data that I get there and figure out which animals I'm finding just based off of the genetic traces alone. And so in this picture, I am using that huge piece of equipment. It's called a Niskin sampler, and I lower it to the bottom of the Chesapeake Bay at 9 sites around the bay. That's taken monthly, and I clasp the water inside of that and then bring it back on the board of the boat. So then I take samples from the water inside of the piece of the equipment and do the same thing. So I'm just figuring out which animals are detected from the bottom of the ocean or of the bay rather than the surface, and what does that tell us about the community that is appearing when dolphins are also present, or even other types of predators. So do we see different fish species when dolphins and sharks are in the water versus when they're not detected just through their genomic traces? And that's really important for us to do with the DNA, because that is non-invasive. We're only taking a sample of water. We're not trawling through the ocean trying to collect fish in a net. We're not electrocuting the water basically so we can count the shocked fish. We're not tagging any animals. It's a new way of figuring out which animals are in the water and what does that mean.
Yeah, great. Thank you so much. And then Jamie and Emery, I'm going to ask you to be really quick on your answers, but tell us about what you're learning about dolphin communication. Jamie, you guys work with hydrophones. Here's another image of, tell us what's going on here.
Yeah, so We use underwater devices to listen for marine mammals in the bay and off of the coast of Maryland. In the bay, we tend to use sea pods, which give us their click detector, dolphin click detectors, sorry. And so the detections are really quick and easy to analyze. Whereas if we put hydrophones or just underwater microphones, they record for hours and hours and hours. So it takes us hours and hours and hours to analyze that data. So we tend to use sea pods when we want to ask a question, are dolphins here? And if so, when? As opposed to our hydrophones, which we can deploy to listen for actual dolphin communication, ambient sound, sounds from other organisms. And so if we want to investigate things like signature whistles, unique whistles that individual dolphins make in their socializing and communication, we would need to use the hydrophone. So it kind of depends on which research questions we're asking as to which kind of acoustic devices we'll deploy. That's my quickest version of that answer. Is that okay?
I'm hoping one day we'll be able to use like the Cornell Bird app where you can log in and hear a certain bird, like we'll hear a certain dolphin, one of the ones that the Potomac people have named. We'll
yes.
know. I don't know.
Yeah. And I think someday we might get there. And I hope for that as well, Whitney, for sure.
I'm gonna, Anne-Marie, I know you're doing a lot of work kind of coastal wide. I don't know if we've covered most of that already. I'm gonna jump into some questions from the audience, but we can also talk about that if we have time. I'm so sorry. So people have some great questions. People are so interested. Howard asked, does their presence indicate a healthier bay? I think we began to answer this. Anne-Marie was talking about how they are this significant species, showing us what, if there's enough food here, then the dolphins will be here. And Michael asked, to what extent does sound from boat engines affect the dolphins? So if you guys want to talk about interacting with dolphins, safely viewing them, any of your hot tips for doing that this summer?
So really quickly, yes, dolphins can alter their communication, the noises that they make and receive when ambient noises or sounds from other things are louder. We know that from published literature. Anecdotally, I can tell you that if you are in a quiet vessel, your sighting has a better chance of being a little more intimate, meaning that the folks who have sent us video footage from kayaks and canoes and sailboats, the dolphins will approach much closer because it is quieter. So that's a hot tip. If you are able to and can be safe, turn off your engine, put it in neutral, and you may get a better dolphin encounter. Of course, always maintain safe boating and wildlife viewing guidelines.
And then Sue asked us about telling the difference between different types of dolphins. Is that something that we need to be aware of? Does that depend on where you're at in the bay, near the mouth, or are they all the same?
It's relatively easy to tell the difference between a common dolphin, which is the most common dolphin along the Atlantic, and a bottlenose dolphin. So a bottlenose dolphin is what you would imagine when you think of a dolphin. A common dolphin has two different colors. So even from the surface, you could probably tell the difference. I sent a link in the answered questions. And so you can click on that to see different photos. And so we're pretty much only seeing bottlenose dolphins in the Chesapeake Bay, which makes Chesapeake Dolphin Watch so relatively easy because we're not trying to distinguish the different species from people's photos that they send in. We're very confident that people are sending us bottlenose dolphins, unless it may be a cownose ray hopping up, because sometimes we see their flaps above the water and think it's a dolphin, or in instances like when I go out and I think a piece of wood is a dolphin because you're just excited. So just if you see that fin come up and down and a big group of them, then you're likely seeing a group of bottlenose dolphins if it's in the Chesapeake.
Great. Jeremy, am I missing some pressing questions? I know I skipped over some. Some people had questions about the app and how they can share it and make sure it's used more now that they're getting a sense of how you guys are using it for on the science side. do you want to answer anything else about that? Why that maybe it's plateaued in use, or is it still going up the number of users each year?
Yeah, so the number of registered users in the app right now is over 10,000. So it is increasing steadily. It has been since 2017, but the number of sightings reported is not necessarily consistent. So for example, 2018 and 2021 were our top sighting reported years. 2019 was our lowest. So I think that even though there's an interest in learning about Chesapeake Bay dolphins, viewing the photos and the map, that interest is increasing. But in terms of actual reporting, that's staying relatively consistent.
Great. I see another question here. Michael asks, what do you learn about the species makeup of the fish in the dolphins' diets, and how do you use this data? So talked about the work with DNA. Are there any other ways when they do a necropsy on a dead animal, do they look at diet at all? What else is going on with diet?
So we can observe, dolphins feeding, and occasionally we'll get photos. We have one of a dolphin throwing a shad up in the air. So we know they're opportunistic hunters. Definitely stranded animals have got content analysis completed whenever possible. Lauren, I think her research is really getting at that question. So I'll let her kind of talk about how she's using eDNA to learn more about what they're eating.
Yeah, it's almost impossible to, unless you have a very clear underwater camera, to see the dolphins hunting in real time. So I'm using that environmental DNA, the forensic traces of both dolphin and fish DNA. So if we're detecting them at the same time, then we can do statistical analyses to figure out which significant presence of certain prey species that we know dolphins will eat. So like menhaden, shad, mackerel, they'll eat almost anything that they can find if it's beneficial to them. And so that's kind of what my research is testing, is in the Chesapeake Bay exactly which fish are showing up at the same time of dolphins, because that's what they're likely eating. However, we do get the common concern from fishermen that dolphins are out competing them in regards to fish catch and preying on fish. However, there's not enough of a presence of dolphins in the bay to worry about that significantly, because humans are the ones catching most of the fish, whereas the dolphins are just being opportunistic. They might even follow a fishing boat. They might show up at a certain time that they know that pound net fishermen will be collecting the fish in their net. So they are really smart, and they're smart hunters. However, they might not be affecting the population as much as we expect.
Yeah, I do get that question in comments on the dolphin stories a lot. People are concerned about their favorite thing to fish. Anne-Marie, is there any difference, and Melissa, in the Potomac? Is there a specific fish that you guys hypothesize they're chasing up as they go farther up, or too hard to say?
Yeah, again, I think Jamie touched on this and Lauren, that it's really hard to get a comprehensive understanding of the dolphin's diet from doing boat-based observation, because when you see it from a boat, a fish, it's completely opportunistic. It just happens to be maybe a certain type of fish that they bring to the surface, but doesn't necessarily represent their entire diet, what it's made of. Dolphins do tend to like soniferous fish, or fish that make sounds. So they like, for example, spot and Atlantic croaker. They like weak fish. And this seems to be a pattern for most of the East Coast, that they like these, especially the Mid-Atlantic region, that they like these species. In terms of when they're going further up the river, again, this is something that maybe we'll be able to determine with time using acoustics. However, from talking to watermen, it seems that when they're far up the river near the 301 bridge, which is like 60 miles upriver, it tends to be when they're going after spot or menhaden.
Okay, and then we do have a question about menhaden. People are always concerned about menhaden populations, and I think we kind of touched on that it's not going to impact one species necessarily, even if it is their favorite food, because they're opportunistic and they're willing to eat what's available. I wrote a story about forage too that might interest you, Kara. With that, you can look that up. It'll be interesting to see how those worlds come together because they're studying salinity impacts on both populations. So maybe there's some overlap there. All right, let's talk about how we can participate and help dolphins. The app, I know we are dropping a lot of links into the chat box. You guys can copy and paste from there. And also you can see any of our stories or any of these folks' websites for more information about how to engage with those things. Yeah, any other, and then there's a book. So Jamie or Lauren, do you want to tell us real quick how to interact with what you guys are doing on the internet with dolphins?
Yeah, so please join the app and report your sightings. Make sure you include an image or a description of what you saw. And we will use your data in various ways and contribute to the broader research goals. We'd love to have you become a donor or a sponsor. And in the future, we're hoping to use members of the public, formerly known as citizen scientists, to help our research in new and different ways as our program continues to grow. So stay tuned on our social media and within the app for updates on that.
Yeah, great.
I'll add on that real quick. So for like the Dolphin Watch app started just as a little side project kind of getting people to report their sightings. And then we added acoustics, and now we're adding environmental DNAs. And then maybe, who knows, drones are next. So we're kind of just adding to a bunch of different ways that we can study dolphins. And I did see some questions about tags. However, I'm not sure how everyone else feels, but dolphins can be very sensitive and vulnerable animals. So if we're trying to catch them and put a tag on them or inside of them, then that would maybe stress them out to the point where it's not even worth that research question. So I just wanted to put that out there just to be aware of the difference in studying dolphins versus something easier, like a fish population that might not be so impacted by human interaction.
Great. Yeah, I know people are used to birds and bird cams and bird tagging now. So that's even monarch butterfly tagging. So that's a good distinction to make. And then with the Potomac Dolphins, how can we stay tuned with what you guys are up to? I know you guys do so much research that communicating it is probably exhausting. So that's how we try to help step into the gap as well. But how can folks follow your work in the Potomac? And are there any other kind of things they can be doing generally to benefit dolphins?
Well, I can start and then I'll hand it over to Melissa. But yeah, the work that we do, the research that we do to do the boat-based work, as well as the acoustics work, that is extremely labor, time, and cost intensive. So, any donation that you would be willing to give, since we are on such a shoestring budget, it really does make a difference, and we do really greatly appreciate it. So I'm going to put a link in the chat here, but our website is pcdolphinproject.org, and to donate, it's /get-involved. Yeah, and all funds go directly to the research, and there's no overhead. And then we also have our website, again, pcdolphinproject.org, as well as our Facebook and Instagram accounts, which is at pcdolphinproj.
Great. And lastly, I mean, I know you guys want to stick to the data, right? But can we speculate a little bit about any trends or trajectories you see coming for dolphins, especially as it relates to the health of the Chesapeake Bay? What are some of the factors or trends that are hopeful, and what are some that are worrisome that people should be aware of that are interested in dolphins? Anybody can jump in.
I would just say sometimes when people see dolphins, including myself, they want to get closer to them and kind of follow them, see where they're going. And it's really hard to not do that, like resist the urge. So I would just say, if you do see them, be polite, don't try to swim with them. They're very large animals. Just kind of that respect of the wildlife, I think, is important. And obviously talking to other people too, letting them know that there is dolphins in the bay, maybe be careful about your boat motor when you're going through these areas. I think that's the main important thing, is the awareness.
Do you guys foresee a near future with dolphin. I come from Washington State where we did orca whale tours and all of that, it being a big part of the local tourism. Is that coming to the Bay? Have you seen any signs of that?
Yep, I think it's coming, and there's a strong interest just naturally with folks around Chesapeake Bay for wildlife watching. So dolphins are a part of that, and definitely a more charismatic than some animals we get to see regularly. So I think as long as it stays responsible wildlife viewing, that would be wonderful.
Yeah. Great. So no swimming with Chesapeake dolphins, even if the water is getting clean enough in some places for you to jump in as well. And then, of course, dolphin health being tied to the Chesapeake Bay, to the health of water quality, which is something we're always writing about. If you're not following Bay Journal and all of that, please continue as a reader, and we'd love to help stay informed together. And yeah, we just are so thankful for you guys and your fascinating work. We hope to continue following everything you guys are doing, studying dolphins, and to bring others along for the ride. Laura, am I missing anything else as we wrap up this session? And again, just keep in touch with these researchers and all of the resources we're popping into the chat box here. And if you want to finish out with how to view this later, if they missed anything and that sort of thing. Oh, you're on mute.
No, I just want to second your thanks to the panelists. You guys have been wonderful guests, and we appreciate your time. Thank you, Jeremy, for helping out behind the scenes, and Whitney for guiding the conversation, and especially to everyone in the audience for spending time with us tonight. I know time is precious, so we appreciate that you did. If you don't know the Bay Journal yet, you can find us at bayjournal.com. We're a nonprofit news organization that covers a whole range of environmental news for the Bay region, including, of course, the Bay Restoration itself. So subscriptions are free. You can get a monthly print edition or a weekly email edition. So there's a subscribe button there if you're not already part of our reader community. So that's all I have for tonight. Look for an email from us within the next day or two, and it will give you a link to the recording as well as the links from the chat box that you've all been requesting.
All right.
All right. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good evening.